When the Ten Commandments was released in 1956, it wasn't just a movie, it was an earthquake that shook the world of cinema, an epic hymn of liberation from Egypt to the desert, from bondage to belief. But behind those majestic glowing frames, there wasn't only light, there was blood, sweat, and the quiet sighs the audience never heard. They were the people who rebuilt the Bible with their bare hands, actors who became gods, and then spent their lives unable to escape the roles they played. A father who nearly lost his real child on the Nile. A woman forced to wear contact lenses until her eyes bled. A 75-year-old director who collapsed from a heart attack atop a tower. And an actor tormented by the smallness of his own body. The Ten Commandments is not merely a story of faith and miracles, it is the tragedy of mortal souls bearing the immortal dream of Hollywood on their shoulders. And here are 10 regrets the cast of the Ten Commandments carried with them for the rest of their lives. 1. Charlton Heston, haunted by the moment he nearly lost his own son on the Nile. The Nile, 1955. The set of the Ten Commandments blazed under dozens of massive lights meant to mimic the searing Egyptian sun. On the still, man-made water floated a small, wicker basket, not holding a doll, but a real baby Fraser Heston, the infant son of Charlton Heston. The boy was cast as baby Moses, while his real father played Moses as an adult, a strange, almost fateful coincidence. The scene went according to plan at first. Charlton stood by the riverbank, eyes fixed on the drifting basket. The crew held their breath before the sacred image. Then, a scream shattered the silence. The basket had begun to leak. Water seeped through the woven reeds, soaking into the fabric lining. In seconds, chaos erupted. Technicians, cameramen, welfare staff, everyone rushed forward. Charlton didn't think. He dove in, pulling his son from the water and clutching him to his chest. The entire set froze. Only the sound of dripping water and a baby's cries filled the air. It was no longer cinema. It was the terrifying moment when the line between acting and reality disappeared. Filming stopped for hours. After that day, Heston never watched that scene again. Whenever the movie was shown, he quietly left the room. To the world, it remained one of the most emotional moments in the Ten Commandments. But to him, it was a scene of sin where faith was tested through his own flesh and blood. 2. Yul Brynner, The Pride War with Charlton Heston.
Would you play at words with me?
No, Lord Prince.
And this murderer has now fled to some distant land.
Behind the scenes of the Ten Commandments, there were two kings, both draped in royal robes, yet never standing as equals. Charlton Heston, 6'4", broad-shouldered voice like thunder. Yul Brynner, 5'10", compact and muscular, but a full 6 inches shorter. On camera, that was a disaster. The crew built platforms, stacked boxes, even tilted the floor just so Yul wouldn't shrink out of frame. During close-ups, he had to stand on steps, tiptoe, sometimes even hold his breath to make his chest look bigger. From that day on, Brynner began a silent war. He turned his Egyptian hotel room into a makeshift gym. They said he wasn't training to be stronger, he was training to be taller. He wanted his muscles to bridge the distance between Moses and Pharaoh. On screen, Ramesses was defiant, proud, divine. But off-screen, Brynner battled the terror of feeling small, both in the frame and in the eyes of the audience. Every time Heston entered the set, Brynner would tense up, gripping his prop sword back ramrod straight, nailed in place by his own pride. When the film wrapped, critics hailed him. "Pharaoh lives again," they said. Brynner only gave a faint smile. In an interview later, he admitted, "I remember nothing but sweat and the fear of being shorter than Moses." It wasn't just a professional insecurity, it was the tragedy of a man fighting his own body to defend his dignity. 3. John Derek, haunted by the hellish set.
When he needed wide crowd shots and didn't have enough extras, he just pulled from his 1923 library.
In 1955, the Egyptian desert stopped being a backdrop. It became a graveyard for human endurance. 25,000 extras, 15,000 animals. Hundreds of cameras, tons of sand and wind sharp enough to cut skin, all for a single scene, the exodus of the Israelites. Director Cecil B. DeMille demanded that it look so real that even God himself would believe it. He ordered the shoot at noon when the temperature hit 50 degrees, 122 degrees. No green screens, no artificial wind, just desert heat and the roar of tens of thousands of real people. John Derrick, who played Joshua Moses' right-hand man, later recalled, "I remember when DeMille yelled, 'Cut,' I couldn't stand up. I didn't know if I was still acting or just trying to survive. Sand swirled like smoke, sweat mixed with dust until faces became masks of mud. Oxen collapsed under their loads. Extras fainted from dehydration. Every night, technicians dismantled the giant VistaVision cameras to scrape sand from the film reels, packed them, drove 10 hours to Cairo, flew them to Hollywood for processing, then flew them back. All so DeMille could review a few minutes of footage. It was perfectionism bordering on madness. But then, madness turned to something sacred. A real sandstorm struck mid-shoot. The sky went black. The desert howled. DeMille didn't yell. Cut. He shouted, "Keep rolling." This is the real Bible. Derrick remembered how everyone fell silent. In that moment, under real thunder, real fury, they all felt small, and for the first time believed they were truly walking through the Bible, baptized in sweat and dust. Many ended up in hospitals from exhaustion, all for one scene that would later be called Holy on Screen. 4. Cecil B. DeMille, the heart attack that nearly killed God on set. At 75, Cecil B. DeMille wasn't just a director. He was the almighty of the movie set, creating the Bible all over again, with bare hands and iron will. That morning, the main camera malfunctioned. DeMille didn't wait for anyone. He began climbing the 40-meter Pharaoh's Gate himself to inspect it. Crew members shouted, "Sir, it's too dangerous." He didn't answer. He just kept climbing step by step, slow, heavy, defiant. Halfway up, a sharp pain struck his chest. His vision blurred. He clutched the railing as his body trembled. Below, the entire crew froze, watching the man who had conjured gods and miracles struggle against his own mortality. They rushed him down, pale and gasping. The doctor ordered 3 months of rest. DeMille simply nodded and returned 2 days later. Not to rest, but to direct bullhorn in hand, voice booming like thunder across the desert. Anne Baxter, who played Nefertiti later, said, "I'd never seen anyone challenge God like that." The film was finished. A masterpiece was born. But the price was DeMille's heart. His health never fully returned. They say the 10 Commandments was a film about God, but those who were there knew the truth. In that desert, another God nearly died, the one who rebuilt the world through cinema. 5. Anne Baxter, 8 months of exhaustion, acting like a talking statue.
This is for the temple ceremony. This...
When Audrey Hepburn turned down the role of Nefertiti, Cecil B. DeMille chose Anne Baxter. What he didn't tell her was that to become Pharaoh's woman, she would have to die a little every day on set. For 8 months before filming, Anne was imprisoned in costume designer Edith Head's fitting room. She tried on hundreds of gowns, each weighing over 10 kilos, made of sequins, real gemstones, and gold-threaded silk. It took 2 assistants just to help her change. Every step she took was a slow drag, like a statue being moved by invisible hands. When filming began, DeMille gave her a command. Nefertiti must not speak much. She isn't a woman, she's an icon. Act as if it's a silent film with dialogue. Anne could no longer breathe, no longer move freely, barely even speak. She was told to look to express everything through what DeMille called The eyes of Egypt, though to her they were the eyes of a woman imprisoned in gold. Every shoot felt like penance. The lights scorched her skin, the gowns crushed her chest, the makeup weighed down her face. Each gesture was timed to the second mechanical lifeless. In her diary, Anne wrote, "I'm not acting anymore. I'm just moving slowly and looking like an Egyptian statue that can talk." DeMille called it the pinnacle of controlled performance. Baxter called it the death of a soul. Once an Oscar-winning actress who made audiences weep in All About Eve, she became nothing more than decoration in a golden desert, dazzling but hollow. A breathtaking role, an immortal image. Yet every time Anne Baxter rewatched the Ten Commandments, she saw herself frozen in gold, and behind Nefertiti's gaze lay the soul of a woman. Hollywood had turned into a living idol. 6. The supporting cast, regretting being erased after 14 months of editing. Not everyone gets to see themselves on screen, especially when the film is The Ten Commandments. 14 months. That's how long post-production lasted, nearly an eternity, in which hundreds of people slowly vanished in the editing room. Frame by frame, face by face, reel by reel, all cut away to forge a perfect masterpiece. But behind that perfection were souls quietly erased, remembered by no one. They were the supporting actors, the nameless extras. The ones who endured 50-degree desert heat, who fainted, who shed sweat and blood for the film, only to sit in the theatre at the premiere and realise they no longer existed in the story. One extra who had worked on the Exodus scene recalled, "I sat there, my heart pounding. When the scene appeared, I couldn't find myself. I had filmed for a month and then I was gone. I cried. Not because my scene was cut, but because it felt like I had never existed. To Cecil B. DeMille, it was just technical editing. To them, it was being erased from history. They had believed they were part of a miracle, but in the final cut, only Sandwind and other faces remained. Some never made another film. Others kept a single behind-the-scenes photo, the only proof they had once stood in God's story. Years later, as the Ten Commandments became immortal, no one mentioned them. No tribute, no credit, no name on the final black screen. Yet it was they, the forgotten ones, who truly built the legend, giving their brief, fragile existence to a story meant to last forever. A film was born, a legend endured. But within those immortal frames still echoes a collective sorrow, the silent regret of those who disappeared so the masterpiece could live. 7. Nina Foch, John Derrick and Deborah Paget, tortured by the eyes of Egypt. To capture the mystical power of Egyptian eyes, the perfection-obsessed Cecil B. DeMille issued a divine decree. All Egyptians must have brown eyes. No hint of blue shall exist in Pharaoh's kingdom. In 1955, contact lenses were primitive, thick, dry, hard plastic soaked in chlorine-heavy solution that smelled like a chemistry lab. But DeMille didn't care. Under the 50-degree E, 122-degree F desert sun, he wanted their eyes to burn like the desert itself. Nina Foch. John Derrick and Deborah Paget, young, beautiful and brave, obeyed. Each morning they pressed the glass-like lenses onto their eyes and endured hours beneath blinding studio lights. Paget later recalled, "I wasn't acting anymore. I was just trying not to cry on camera." Nina Foch said she once had to remove hers mid-scene because it felt like 1,000 needles stabbing into my eyes. John Derrick. The flawless model-turned-actor would close his eyes in darkness after every take, letting tears wash away the burn. But the worst moment came for Yvonne De Carlo. During one dialogue scene, she felt her vision blur, the lens slipped, fell into the sand and shattered. DeMille exploded in anger, until he saw her natural green eyes gleaming under the lights. For the first time, he relented. From that day, De Carlo was the only Egyptian allowed to keep her real eyes. She later laughed bitterly. "At least my eyes were real. Thank God I could still see my way home." Audiences later, praised them as Egyptians with soulful eyes. But few knew that behind that beauty were nights spent in darkness, numbing drops, cold compresses, whispered prayers, begging that by morning they'd still be able to see. 8. Yvonne De Carlo, The Love and Tragedy, born from the film.
And the cloud is red with fire.
At such a time,
In the Egyptian desert of 1955, Yvonne De Carlo, the woman with blazing green eyes, stepped onto the set dressed as Moses' wife. There she met the man who would change her life, a man whose name would never appear on the poster. He was Bob Morgan, a quiet stuntman with a gentle smile who always tipped his hat when she passed. He wasn't a star, didn't have million-dollar contracts. But when the wind whipped up the sand, he was the one who held her hand across the dunes, the one who offered her water when the desert heat nearly felled her. To others, it was courtesy. To Yvonne, it was light, something real amid the make-believe world of Hollywood. When the 10 Commandments wrapped, they fell in love. A year later, Yvonne De Carlo, Hollywood beauty and screen siren, married the unknown stuntman. They had 2 sons and a modest home outside Beverly Hills. Yvonne once said, "I played Sephora, the woman who stood behind Moses. In real life, I just wanted to stand behind Bob and believe he was my miracle." But miracles fade. In 1962, while Morgan was filming a train sequence for another movie disaster, struck, the train derailed. He was crushed, losing a leg and nearly his life. Yvonne abandoned her career and stayed by his side in the hospital, singing softly every day the same voice that once filled Broadway theatres, now a lullaby for one broken man. She later said, voice trembling, "If not for the 10 Commandments, I would never have met him. But because of it, my life changed forever." Their love began in the desert wind and ended in the hum of hospital machines. After Morgan's death, Yvonne never remarried. On her dressing table stood 2 photos, one from the 10 Commandments and one of the man who once held her in the burning sands. On screen, she was Sephora, the faithful wife of a prophet. In life, she was Yvonne De Carlo, the woman who learned that every miracle has its price, and that true love is sometimes the pain that never fades. 9. Edward G. Robinson, tormented by a role that mirrored his own betrayal.
the deliverer is Moses.
On screen, Edward G. Robinson played Dathan the traitor who betrayed his people, kneeling before Pharaoh in exchange for gold and power. But off-screen, he was living that very role. In the 1950s, Hollywood was in the grip of the anti-communist hysteria, the infamous blacklist. One name on that list, and your career was over. Robinson, a beloved Jewish actor famous for Little Caesar, found himself swept into a political storm he barely understood. He had signed a few anti-fascist petitions, noble at the time, yet was branded a leftist. Friends abandoned him. Studio doors slammed shut. A great star became untouchable overnight. When Cecil B. DeMille, a staunch conservative and outspoken supporter of the Hollywood purges, offered him the role of Dathan, the industry fell silent. The irony was cruel. DeMille, the man who had championed the witch hunt, now chose a blacklisted actor to play a betrayer of his own people. Robinson understood the message, but he needed the work, needed to be seen again, so he accepted. On set, he was flawless, the sly smile, the serpentine voice, the treacherous glint in his eye. But inside, he was crumbling. Years later, in his unfinished memoir, he wrote, "I played a traitor while I was betraying the trust of my friends." When the 10 Commandments premiered, Hollywood forgave him. He was welcomed back and eventually received an honorary Academy Award. Yet he never watched the film again. The role that redeemed his reputation also condemned him forever, trapping him in the image of a man who had once truly betrayed. 10. Anne Baxter, regretting the scandalous forbidden scene.
You will destroy Egypt, or Egypt will destroy you. I belong to you, Moses.
In 1955, under the blinding desert sun, Anne Baxter slipped into a shimmering gold gown to become Nefertiti Egypt's most dangerous woman. The embodiment of desire itself. Opposite her stood Charlton Heston as Moses preparing for their fateful confrontation. Director Cecil B. DeMille. The Lord of the Set wanted the moment to burn with passion to make audiences believe that what existed between them was a hunger stronger than faith. The scene began. Baxter approached Heston and purred the line, "I could make him forget all this religious madness." She performed as if her soul were torn between the sacred and the sinful. When the cameras stopped rolling, silence fell over the entire set. No one spoke. From that day on, Anne Baxter began to dread the words, "Take it again." She knew the Ten Commandments was meant to be a biblical epic, a story of faith and virtue, yet DeMille shaped her into the embodiment of temptation, a new Eve in Egypt's Eden. With each passing day, Baxter felt herself slipping away. She was no longer an Oscar-winning actress. She was a beautiful vessel, forced to radiate seduction for someone else's vision. When the film premiered, audiences praised Nefertiti's allure and the religious press condemned it. Baxter became the face of sin in Scripture, a title she spent the rest of her life trying to escape. In later interviews, she rarely mentioned the film. She once wrote that the Ten Commandments didn't just drain her physically, it made her question her own faith. She had given everything for art, but when the lights went out, all that remained was emptiness, as if a piece of her soul had been left behind, buried forever in the sands of Egypt. When the Ten Commandments premiered in 1956, the world rose to its feet. People called it the film of God, a testament to the power of cinema, a miracle that parted the Red Sea. But behind those immortal frames were ordinary humans rebuilding the Bible with their own hands. They didn't just make a movie, they lived in it. They hurt in it. The Ten Commandments was a masterpiece of faith, but also a reminder that every miracle is paid for with a human price. Every light on that set was a real burn. Every glorious frame a final breath someone traded away. Today, audiences still watch it every Easter. They sit before the screen, marveling as the Red Sea divides, as the Israelites cross, as the music swells like the voice of angels. But within those scenes still echo the heartbeat of DeMille atop the tower, the laboured breaths of Anne Baxter in her suffocating gown, and the cries of baby Moses Charlton Heston's real son as his basket began to sink. When the Red Sea closed and the film ended, those who made it had rewritten Scripture, not with ink, but with blood, tears, and regret. And perhaps that is what makes the Ten Commandments truly eternal. If this story makes you believe that even light comes at a cost, leave a comment below which part of the film or of their lives haunts you most. And if you'd like to uncover more hidden stories of Hollywood, tales of fame, love, and the price of immortality, hit like, share, and subscribe to join the journey ahead.